So no intro, I'm just going to jump right into this video. I will have to ask though that you excuse my voice as I have a slight cold. I'm crazy excited about this game, it looks amazing, but before I get to the actual meat of the video, I want to start by saying that the purpose of this channel and these videos are to set a challenge for myself. I want to learn more about this game, I want to know it intimately. Instead of just taking the easy route as I did in POE1 and following other people's content and their guides and their suggestions and ideas, I want to have some of my own. And going from POE1 to POE2 seems like a perfect time to make this transition from being a user of other people's ideas to essentially making my own. And this fresh start is honestly one of the things that makes POE2 so awesome for me. There will be, at least during the start of the early access, no never sync filters, no fleshed out build guides, no tried and practiced tactics, and no completed POE wiki to rely on. Ultimately, the plan for me is to have fun, and for me, the idea of fun is around this power fantasy idea of a character that just demolishes his enemies on his own terms. So imagine POE1's Cast and Crit Ice Nova Frostbolt's dual wielding, cost breeze, malice character. It's an absolute powerhouse, and it's super satisfying to play. The skill itself just looks amazing, and then you throw in a microtransaction. It just looks like a piece of art when you screen cap it. Now, the first build I want to try making is going to be centered around the Monk's Charge Staff ability. Essentially, Charge Staff buffs you so that for a set amount of time, your attacks shoot projectiles. And here you can see Mark demonstrating it. This ability just looks so cool, it makes me think of Star Wars and lightsabers cutting through swaths of enemies like butter. So at the very least, I want to build around this ability. Now, you can take this even further by combining it with Staggering Palm, which also gives you a buff that makes your attacks fire projectiles for a duration. It's just really that the trigger for it is different. Whereas one relies on shock, the other relies on stun. And I also just recently noticed that Staggering Palm specifically mentions projectiles, while the Charge Staff mentions lightning shockwaves instead of lightning projectiles. Hopefully, the shockwaves do count as projectiles as well, just so that we can play around with projectile interactions. So for example, the more projectile support gem, and there's a note on the passive skill tree that gives spells a chance to shoot more projectiles. Now, you know what's even better? The addition of more projectiles. So if we take a look at the Ascendancy nodes, scatter them to the winds, this essentially fires more projectiles, at least I hope they count as projectiles, not shockwaves, on melee critical hits. But wait, there's more. Using meta skills like Cast on Crit or Cast on Shock, we can trigger even more things. The downside to these, of course, is just the opportunity cost of reserving the spirit and not having it available for other meta skills. I'm hoping there are some spirit gems that we haven't seen yet that might help us be more tanky. I see a lot of stuff for more damage, not a lot of stuff for tankiness, at least for the monk. At least I don't want to give up Ascendancy nodes to trade off for that tankiness. Maybe a bit selfish here. Plus, there's also the energy usage, which caps these meta skills. But there is a node to assist with this issue on the passive tree, and once again, there is a node on the monk Ascendancy that helps with as well, but same as before, I don't want to sacrifice the fun stuff to survive, or to assist with this energy problem, though we might have to. Now, you might be thinking this looks kind of crazy at this point, you know, all these projectiles, all this flashiness, but we can take this even further. There's an Ascendancy node called Lead Me Through Grace, which we can use to increase your spirit so you can run even more trigger stuff. So we could be running something like Cast on Crit and Cast on Shock at the same time. Or possibly even more stuff. I'm not exactly sure what the total spirit amount we'll have access to is. And of course we could run defense stuff if we really need to, but you know, that's what dodge rolling is for, right? Plus, on the way to scatter them to the winds, we have Sunder My Enemies, which allows critical hits to ignore non-negative enemy monster elemental resistances as well. Now, my Ascendancy tree will most likely, you know, since we do want to live a little bit, look something like this. We're going to go to the left side here for some responsible tankiness, and then the right side for what we really want, that sweet trigger on skills, or trigger on some sort of effect, flashiness. Now, according to GGG, it will not be easy at all to hit 100% crit, but we'll try to get as close to 100% as we can so that we can then proc elemental expression as much as possible. Even power charges, endurance charges, frenzy charges, they don't come with buffs anymore for our character like they did in the past, so that means that power charges won't increase our crit chance just by having them around. So that makes crit capping harder. So to actually spew out the projectiles, once we get our buffs running and whatnot, we'll want to do as many attacks as possible in that short period of time that the buff is up. Now, these attacks don't have to actually hit, they just have to be performed to get the projectile out. This is demonstrated in Mark's video where he essentially attacks the air and we see the projectiles go out. Now, looking at the videos that are available to us, it seems like Tempest Flurry, Whirling Assault, and I'm excited for this last one, Flicker Strike, will be our best bet. Due to our positioning on the passive skill tree and the passive we've seen thus far, it seems like we'll have a not so difficult time generating and sustaining the power charges. Plus, we can also make use of a support gem like multiple charge, or there's one called perpetual charge as well to make it even easier. So I do want to explore making use of Flicker Strike to get those projectiles out as fast as possible. However, I would need to strike some sort of balance between Charge Staff and Flicker Strike, as both do use power charges. It would be interesting to see what happens if the buff runs out in the middle of the Flicker Strike. Does it snapshot and sort of let Flicker Strike keep shooting out the projectiles until the skill ends? Because technically the skill was buffed in the beginning of the skill, and because the skill lasted so long, the duration of the buff ran out. So would it still continue to shoot out those projectiles? That's something I would really like to take a look at. And if power charges for Flicker are not up, I can always make use of the other two skills I mentioned to cause those projectiles to come out, namely Tempest Flurry and Whirling Assault. Now, I am worried a bit about survival. Mentioned this before, but we're not really sure exactly how it'll go. I'm not sure how hard an enemy will hit me and what it'll feel like to get hit, or how close to death I'll be getting in just the very beginning of the game. It's something we'll have to see, but I would like to avoid hitting maps at 100 deaths. I'm not sure if the node and protect me from harm with some investment, evasion, and just capping out our resistances, ailment immunity, and so on will give us enough survivability, but yeah, this is something we'll have to look at as we go. Thanks to being able to use the gold respec though, we should be able to try out a lot of different paths on the skill tree to explore some interesting interactions, like maybe incorporating cast on shock setup for charge stuff or even flicker strike. This I've mentioned before. And that's all I really had for this video. I'll be making some updates in the coming days if and when more monk related news comes out. If not, then once early access is released, I plan on making short update videos on the progress of the build and what I've tried and haven't tried and want to try, and just essentially how it feels to play, really. I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts on this, so feel free to leave comments on your plans for the early access, especially if you're planning on playing a similar type of build like this. I'm interested in what your approach is. Like, what do you think is too much triggering? How far are you guys going to try to take this? It'll be fun to see. Yeah, have fun.